Mormon comedic gold. That's the point she's making, bro. So this is gonna be me reacting to a Jubilee video that just dropped. Oh my goodness.
And I think that
I can't believe he's using this as a justification of how not sexist the LDS Church is. Mormon Obama.
I'm excited to see what happens. Clearly something's gonna have to happen.
And I agree with him, because there's a pattern set in the LDS Church. Here's the divine revelation from God. We have to follow this to the letter of the law. Except when we realize for a long time how wrong we are.
You don't think that I wouldn't trade a little bit of Tember's gayness for 20 years extra on this earth?
What? Dude! What the f did you just say?
As a fundamentalist Mormon, having 5 parents and 44 brothers and sisters was the norm for Calvin Wayman.
today I'll be spending a day with Calvin, an ex-cult member.
Calvin is on his shit. The thing I love about the show is just even in the name, culture, emphasis on the word cult.
I have friends who grew up in like real cults. We had somebody on the show who has 44 siblings and 4 moms because he grew up in a polygamist compound. When I look at that, I'm like, okay, that's a cult.
And it's not just gonna be heavy all the time.
So his dad was Nick Cannon. Is that what you're saying? Nick Cannon was his dad? Is that what you're saying right there?
You had more siblings than there were presidents for a while.
Holy shit. You're right.
We're gonna have a bunch of guests on the show. I'm into creativity, comedy, entertainment. I want this podcast to be the creative expression for my story and for my perspectives on life. Oh my God! God! Oh my! I am excited for this episode. It's going to be my first ever podcast episode where I'm reacting to something very topical for my life and for this show. By the way, if this is your first time seeing me, I'm Calvin Wayman. I grew up in a cult my entire life. I spent a whole lifetime in a cult, and I left it a few years ago. I grew up in Fundamentalist Mormonism. I have 1 dad, 4 moms, and 44 brothers and sisters. And I started my entire life over. It was quite the journey getting out and getting to where I am today. I grew up in a small town, and now I live in New York City. Thanks for being here. So you've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail. So this is going to be me reacting to a Jubilee video that just dropped. And something that even people that have been following the podcast, you may not know this, but I was actually in a Jubilee episode. In fact, this was the first piece of content of me telling my story in any real capacity on YouTube was with Jubilee. So Jubilee reached out to me a short time after leaving the religion, and I was in an episode called Do All Ex-Cult Members Think the Same? I grew up as a Mormon fundamentalist. I was in it for 30 years. I have 1 dad, 4 moms, and I'm one of 45 kids.
I didn't know I was in a cult. 3, 2, 1, go.
We didn't call it a cult. I certainly didn't join a cult.
It's invisible. You don't know.
What's your life? I mean, you were born in it.
It's part of it. Yeah, when you're born in it. And I think that's one of the reasons you can get in those mental thought traps.
My leader had good intentions. 3, 2, 1, go.
I think they were sincere. But the ultimate conclusion I came to is just because you're sincere doesn't mean you can't be sincerely wrong. I think it's really easy to blanket say that someone is quote unquote brainwashed. The deepest win that could come from this is empathy, maybe for people in it, but also for the people outside of it too.
I entered the cult voluntarily. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'll link that somewhere in the description if you want to check out that episode. Historical context. Mormonism is a big story. Mormonism claims Joseph Smith as their prophet and the founder of the entire church. Fundamentalists, where I come from, of course still claim him, Joseph Smith, as their founder and prophet. But somewhere along the way, the LDS Church started to veer off very drastically from what the original founder, Joseph Smith, taught. And there are so many stories and narratives that have formed since the changes. Some of them, like to this day, where sometimes it's hard to decipher if an existing member is going along with a well-crafted narrative to cover up the past, or if they're just taking something on that they've heard before and don't actually know what actually happened. So there's probably going to be conversations around race or polygamy or anything like that. And I want to offer my perspective as a fundamentalist Mormon, ex-fundamentalist Mormon, because there's a lot of history that is missed. And in Mormonism, it's such a strange phenomenon. Like, they don't teach it, and they don't teach their members a lot of the history, and it gets swept under the rug. But a fundamentalist Mormon, we grew up on it. We were being taught the history every single week, if not every day in some households, as to why we lived and practiced the way that we live. And, like, for example, a common misconception, we'll see if it pops up in this Jubilee episode, but a common misconception is polygamy was never a doctrine, a core teaching of the LDS Church. Now, if you're a fundamentalist Mormon, or if you've read any part of the LDS history, if you've just cracked open just a few sermons of the early church leaders, you know that just flatly not the case. Like, literally, the reason I am, like, get this, like, when there was a separation between fundamentalist Mormons and regular Mormons, which was sparked by the LDS Church doing away with polygamy, and fundamentalists being like, no, we've been taught by our leaders for our entire lives long that this is how we get to not just heaven, the highest heaven. It is a celestial law. In fact, it was so deeply embedded that they felt like they had to leave and go form their own church separate from their mother church, the thing they loved so much. So they believed in it that deeply. And so my point is, how do I know it was doctrine? Or taught as doctrine? Because I freaking exist. Literally, my being one of 45 kids, the reason I even am born, I wouldn't even exist if the LDS Church did not have that as a doctrine deep enough that my ancestors for the last 4 decades felt the need that they had to break away from the church, the LDS Church, and continue living it. Of course, I think that was misguided and all that sort of stuff, but that's a different conversation for today's episode. For really adding context, if I can, anywhere throughout this reaction video on history that is not talked about enough in the modern age of Mormonism. So with that precursor, let's just go ahead and get into the episode, and we'll see what happens.
Do I believe that Heavenly Father would keep her out of the celestial kingdom if she
continues to have lesbian relationships?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Gen, and I explore social and controversial issues through both sides. And I'll be moderating this episode of Middle Ground, Mormons versus Ex-Mormons.
That's the thing that Jubilee didn't always do, have moderators. I think that's a great addition to Jubilee, because if you've watched any of their videos, some of their stuff can get quite heavy. So, good job, Jubilee.
The first prompt is, Mormonism is a cult.
Whoa! Everybody, every single ex-Mormon walks over. The only thing I'm going to say so far right here, this is something I've said on other episodes of Cultured. The last person, well, I'll tell the fun story I like to share first. There's this story of fish swimming in water. And there's 2 fish swimming together. They pass an older fish, and the older fish says, "How's the water, boys?" The 2 fish look at each other, confused. They continue on swimming, and after they swim away for a little bit, one of the younger fish says to the other, "What the hell is water?" And I think that's a perfect illustration of cultiness. The last person on the planet to recognize a cult is a cult member. If you're in a cult, you're the last one on the planet to realize that's what it actually is. So just a tidbit here, just getting started.
And 2 are like critical things in your life that you're told how you're supposed to do them, right? Like your sexuality, the way you dress, what you eat.
What underwear you wear.
Mm-hmm.
What underwear you wear. Okay, this is a big deal. In Mormonism, I'm glad they have this caption thing that pops up right here around Mormon underwear. I'll just read what Jubilee puts on. The temple garments are worn by adult members of the church who have made sacred promises of fidelity to God's commandments. Yes. The garments, as it's called, is such a special thing. In fact, I wore the garments. I wore what we shortened it to just being called long underwear in my upbringing. I wore long underwear up until the day that I left. I wore it my entire life long. And it's taught to be as like this thing that protects you from spiritual and even physical ailments. And in fact, some people are so obsessive with it that we grew up being told these stories that were supposed to be faith-building stories of people that loved their garments so much that they didn't even really take them fully off when they took a bath. Like they would talk about church leaders would take half of the garment off and bathe one side and then half and bathe the other side. Like that's how much the garments were awesome. And here's the thing I want to share here. I believed it. Oh, I believed it. I was in a car wreck. And it's actually only been as I've been out of the religion where I've actually reflected on that car wreck and thought, holy shit, I could have died. Like, actually. So I was driving on a freeway going 80 miles an hour, which is really fast, and a 2-lane highway, and then a semi tractor trailer doesn't see me, goes into my lane. I'm either going to be crushed under the semi or I had to take a left and veer off the road. I veered off the road, rolled my car, and the car slid and then ended up on its side. I had 2 friends with me. All the windows broke. We had to climb out the back window without a scratch. Super lucky. Except at the time, I was not surprised at all. I felt safe during the, whatever was going on. It felt like slow motion like they talk about in the movies. But I believed the reason that I survived is because I was wearing the long underwear. And then my story was even talked about. And people were like, yeah, good thing Calvin was wearing the long underwear. So just a tidbit here. We'll see how much time we can get through this because that's a comment just 44 seconds in, but let's keep moving.
Maybe finally, because it was hard to admit, growing up Mormon, it was hard to admit that it was a cult. But I think when you look at, again, the critical thinking, the lack of it, I think is a big red flag.
I feel like with Mormonism and growing up in that culture, which is that word right there, I had no issue stepping forward, but not necessarily to specifically focus on the negative connotation, but really just what the word is. Let's call it what it is.
I'll just speak kind of from a psychological perspective because that's my background. Does the organization, withhold information from its members with the intent of controlling the thoughts of the members? Does the organization manipulate the members through emotion? And then do they have excessive controls of behavior? And while it's deeply offensive to tell anyone they're a member of a cult, no one's going to ever say they're a member of a cult because no one thinks they're in a cult.
We have the disagreeers.
He just totally said it. Exactly what I said. Like, if you would have came to me when I was 20 or 25 or like any point and said, you're in a cult, dude, I would have been like, no. In fact, even when I left, in fact, even when I was on Jubilee, this is what's fascinating. So, man, I want to go. I haven't watched that Jubilee episode in a while, but it's been like 3 years. And when I was on Jubilee, I remember it feeling like, wait, they wanting me to talk about my cult. Do I actually think it's a cult? And I remember being wishy-washy around it if I even considered it a cult.
I still don't use the strong language of a cult. I don't think it's productive for the people that are there because they get defensive. But yeah, certainly if you're in it and it's what you're doing in your day-to-day.
And that's fundamentalist Mormonism, which is even cultier than the regular Mormon Church, in my opinion. But the Mormon Church certainly has its cultiness as well. But super solid point that John DeLynn here is making on, the last person on the planet that's going to realize it's a cult is a cult member.
Step forward.
So I'm a convert to the church and born and raised in an apartment member family, lived a gay lifestyle before I joined the church. And it's it's a little disingenuous to me when people say that the church tried to hide stuff from me, because I grew up in a family that was very stereotypical. So it was just very strict, and I remember things being talked about like polygamy, like lots of sensitive church history topics growing up, and that's partially why when I distanced myself from Christianity generally to go live a gay lifestyle, I really had concerns with the church, but ultimately knowing those things only strengthened my testimony when I came back to it. I completely left that lifestyle behind, and of course I still have same-sex attraction, but I am definitely happier now being married to a woman, having kids.
Okay, so this is a LDS guy, it sounds like, that is gay but married to a woman. So, I mean, at this point, I'm not going to say anything more than that. I mean, his choice, I suppose.
Kids than I was with my boyfriends.
When I think of a cult, I think of an organization that's really controlling, and they don't let you exercise freedom or autonomy. They control how you think. They control.
Okay, I've seen this guy before, and I just gotta tell me I'm wrong in the comments with this. By the way, guys, I forgot to say this at the front. Any comments that you guys give me on these videos on YouTube, especially, help me understand what you're looking for or what you're curious about. And of course, I'm going to talk about things that I find fascinating or interesting, like this video, but it can help me formulate the content. So yeah, any questions you have throughout this, if I say anything, please comment. And of course, smash that like button and subscribe. But this guy, what's his name? Quacker. I've seen him before on other YouTube stuff. Tell me I'm wrong, that he reminds me of, I'm going to call him Mormon Obama. He is Mormon Obama. He speaks so clean and so clearly. I feel like I could picture him being like a president someday.
What you say and how you say it. But if I look at Mormon culture expansively, I don't see people that are controlled. I feel like the word cult, I mean, if you break it down to mean at some point someone suggested that I live my life a certain way, then everything's a cult. And if everything's a cult, then nothing's a cult.
There are many members of the church who have this mindset that...
That's a good point. And I would take that even further. I actually think there is a lot of cultiness in a lot of things. I think cultiness is on a spectrum. It's a sliding scale. It's not necessarily... we only know the ones that are the most obvious ones, usually. But yeah, I would say... I mean, he was trying to do it to dismiss the cultiness of the LDS Church, but I would just say, what you're saying is kind of right, and there is a bit of cultiness in a lot of parts of society. Maybe that's foreshadowing future episodes of Cultured.
Church who have this mindset that when the prophet speaks, the debate is over, and you should just not think about it. And that's not right. Honestly, I think that is cultish. But that is not what the church has taught over time.
I think, though, that you are told, seek your own answer, pray, but if it differs from what the prophet is saying, then you might be being deceived by Satan, or you got the wrong answer. It should ultimately align with what the prophet is saying, and that's why they say, you know, read the Book of Mormon, pray.
Yes, okay, I got to jump in here. So what she's essentially saying is, in Mormonism, you're taught, seek your own answer. Find the truth. But if it differs from what God says, what the prophet says, what these books say, you're wrong, not them. Change your ways because you're probably worldly and messed up in some ways. That is one of the biggest frickin' red flags that I think Mormonism has, other cultures, and certainly how I was raised in Fundamentalist Mormonism. Because it happens early on, and it starts to train yourself to distrust yourself and to distrust that internal voice. And I don't know if they're going to talk about missionaries or stuff on this yet, but that's something that I find like a psychological trick almost of missionaries. When they come to your door after they give you the Book of Mormon and stuff like that, they'll say, pray about it and see if it's a true book. And like, that's a leading thing already. Pray that this is true. No. And it's almost like if you have a contrite heart or whatever and a soft spirit, then you're going to see the truthfulness of this book. And if you don't see the truthfulness of the book, well, you're just wrong because the book is actually true. Like, that's kind of the energy that Mormonism tends to have.
See if it's true for yourself, and if you don't get an answer, pray harder, go talk to someone, have more experiences, try again, until you get the right answer that it's true. So I think it's a little disingenuous to say that you can seek truth on your own that doesn't align with the prophet.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the reasons we needed to have prophets, because they need to tell us the true truth and they need to connect us to God. My grandfather, who was one of the leaders of the cult I was from, a fundamentalist Mormon church known as the Work of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was the same church as Warren Jeff's church, FLDS, one generation before me. So my dad, my parents, and everybody all grew up in that same church, and then it split off and became two, but they lived like 5 minutes apart. Like, the same churches are like, a lot of the people that are from the Work still live in Colorado City, Arizona, where Warren Jeff's is headquartered. But I remember my grandfather saying, who was one of the church leaders from my church, that, and again, this is just another control thing, that, and it reminds me of what she's saying right now, and that is, you can't bypass the church or the prophet or anybody. You can't go have a direct connection to God without going through the true channels. Like, you need them. You need to have and I'm not even particularly religious at all at this point, as far as like, if there's a God. I think the most honest answer I can say to myself is I don't know. But just the psychological ploy there of like, you can't go get something yourself. You got to go through these channels. And where does that tradition come from? Where did my grandfather get that tradition? From the LDS Church.
Line with the prophet, because that doesn't generally just seem to be how it goes.
Yeah, but that completely goes in the face of, I was a missionary for 2 years, and the number one message we do when we present the Book of Mormon and Mormonism at large to somebody is the infamous Moroni's promise. We say, go home, pray about it. You need to develop a relationship with God that is so unique and strong that you can recognize when he is talking to you.
And here, I'm just going to keep going on and off and pausing here to give these insights, because the thing that happens in Mormonism all the time that deserves to be called out is there's so many good sounding things, and it is usually only somebody that was in it, saw it, believed it, and then see the bullshit where they pull out and actually can call it out. And this is one of those things. What's this guy's name? Cardin or something? Yeah, we're told to go and pray and stuff like that, but go and pray to get this relationship. That's like a lip service thing, just to like get you to feel good about it when you finally accept it. Because if you say I prayed about it and God told me it was wrong, do you think they're going to accept that? Fuck no. They're going to be like, yeah, you must not have prayed hard enough.
Talking to you whether or not this is the path you're supposed to take. The idea that Mormonism is a cult is a pejorative trope that has been an anti-Mormon slur against the church for a long time. And I always ask, by what rubric? You mentioned the bite model before, and I've seen that you've interviewed Stephen Hassan on your show, and he's given a rubric. Well, that same author has called anybody that voted for Donald Trump a cult. He wrote an entire book about the cult of Trump. And if you apply any of these bite model methodologies or any of these cult definitions, my show choir in high school was a cult. Apple is a cult. Wait until the next Star Wars movie comes out. It's a cult. That word is used in the same way, with the same inefficacy and the inability to back it up, unless you use people that, unfortunately, in your case, were not actually...
Okay, here's some of my thoughts on cult stuff. I will say one thing that I don't know if he would agree with me on, but I think others would. And I think the bite model is useful, but incomplete. If you're looking at something that's culty, I think you have to look at a few things. One of them, there's a lot of different factors, but the point that I want to share here is, what happens when you leave? What are the stakes for staying and what are the stakes for going? Because when you look at it that way, there are some things that are not even religious organizations that can be culty. Can you be your true self in the group? If you can't be your true, authentic, fully okay, accepted self, and not feel like you're going to be socially ostracized for being that, then you need to look a little bit deeper, probably. So that's one thing I would say look at, is you got to see what's going to happen if you decide to have a thought or an idea that differs from the group, and that can determine how culty it is.
Actually being truly Mormon.
Stephen Hassan would agree that Apple can have some of the traits of a cult or the military or an educational institution or a corporation, but he also has a harm continuum, a continuum of harm. And if you add up all the deaths of the People's Temple, Jim Jones, of
this is kind of what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm glad that John DeLynn here is talking about harm, because that's kind of my point when I'm saying, what's at stake when you're doing something that's different from the group? And are you going to face a lot of negative consequences for having some thought or idea that is different from what everybody accepts of you?
Any of the cults you mentioned, it won't add up to the number of LGBT youth in the Mormon Church that have killed themselves. And so we can talk about just severity of, children are cut off, some children are homeless because their parents kick them out. Now, I'll admit, the Mormon Church does a lot of good for a lot of people. But if you just add up the amount of harm, I think that's when it goes from just a silly trope to a very serious conversation.
I can't vouch and say that an organization as large as the LDS Church doesn't have any damage. Obviously, people can do damage, but at the same token, if we hold every organization to a standard that implies they can't have any sort of cultural stains that the entire country has struggled with, well, good luck. And as someone who believes in Jesus Christ, my hope and my goal is we can get rid of it. We can get rid of that out of our church eventually. But that is not a unique Mormon problem. That is a problem that was given to us by the generations that came before, the generations that said separate water fountains, the generations that said, oh, you're gay, you should be going to camp, whether it's a Baptist, Mormons, whatever. That stuff is evil. But does that evil make us uniquely evil, or is that a West?
I find this a weak argument right here. I think I was going with him for a bit, but when he's basically saying that, oh, but there's other people that also do bad stuff, so why pick on us? No. We're not talking about other people right now. This episode's literally called Mormons and Ex-Mormons, Can We See Eye to Eye? So let's talk about what are the things that the Mormon Church does. Just because some other group does horrible things doesn't make the Mormon Church doing horrible things okay.
An American problem that has permeated these organizations.
The Mormon community welcomes the LGBTQ community.
So as a gay member of the church, I truly believe that I feel welcome. I feel at home in the church. I realize some people have an issue with, obviously we have the doctrine that sexual expression should only be between a married man and woman, but that same standard applies to everyone. And the scriptures are clear that male and female, black and white, bond and free, all are welcome to come into Christ, and that's the purpose of the church.
The church agrees that no matter what you are, and who you love, they're not going to shun you because of that. You might not get the same privileges necessarily, but that doesn't, in the church,
Wait,
they
what
won't
do you mean
shun
about privileges?
such as
okay, this is interesting. Okay, there's something happening right here in the episode. So this guy in the in blue shirt, he's saying all the right things. He's saying the things that the church wants you to say and what you believe as a member to make it sound good. Oh, we're supposed to do all this. And they were going along with it, and then this girl, this woman, she says something like, you may not get the same privileges, and notice how this other dude, Cardin, jumps on it. So there is surface stuff, and this is why Mormons have a reputation for being so nice, because they are nice as fuck on the surface. then go deeper. Like, start poking at it. And what I think she just did is she just made an accidental slip, because they were talking about why, yeah, they have, like, they're totally accepted. And she's like, yeah, they may not have the same privileges. And they don't. They don't. They're treated differently. They don't, if you're part of the LGBTQ community, like, you can't do certain things in the church. If you're openly gay, you can't do certain things in the temples and stuff like that. And so she just said that, and it's almost like a slip up of how we really feel. And then this guy jumps in. Let's see what he says.
Like,
such as
elaborate.
like going to the temple, that kind of a privilege. So
yeah, but that also is the same for straight people. If you're not living the law of chastity and you're straight, you could have your temple recommended as well.
It's not the same. If you're straight, you just get married who you love. You can go to the temple. You're gay, you marry who you love. You can't. It's not the same.
it's very personal, but the church doesn't specifically, when you're invited to church, they don't come up to you and ask you, are you straight? They're very welcome.
Yes,
are you
yes.
straight? Are you lesbian? Are you gay? They ask you about yourself.
You don't have to fill out a form?
No.
Oh, see, when I walked in, I had to fill out a form. No, totally.
Can the disagreeers please step forward, please?
The concept that straight people and gay people have it equally hard to enter the temple is a complete joke.
Liz, you rock. I totally agree. I'm so glad you said that.
Because straight people, yes, also have to deal with their trials and their faith and live the law of chastity, do X, Y, and Z, and yet they're not having to go against their instincts or their nature. It's all lined up for them. Like if we were to flip it and say that being gay is the norm in the church, let's just pretend for a second, and you were the straight one, and you wanted to go to the temple, and in order to go to the temple, you would have to swear to never sleep with women again, and you would only be able to sleep with men. That would feel very wrong to you.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. We live in a hypersexualized society, and I think that is very, very difficult for gay, lesbian, transgender members of the church, and so on and so forth. And just as Tember said, the Lord in his infinite mercy does not spare any of us from trials. But this idea that, I don't want to say that their trial is unique, because it is unique, but I look at it a little bit differently. I have leukemia. My illness will kill me 20 years earlier than Tember. You don't think on my deathbed, forgive me, you don't think that I wouldn't trade a little bit of Tember's gayness for 20 years extra on this earth?
What? Dude, what the fuck did you just say? On my deathbed, wouldn't you think wouldn't trade a little bit of Tember's gayness, I guess that's the other guy's name, the gay guy's name, to be alive for 20 more years? What? What's the connection here? Oh, that leukemia is your trial? And you're comparing cancer to being gay? Holy shit, dude. And you're... Dude, this is just showing how people really think about this. But I'm still not getting the freaking trade-off here. Like, it just shows how bad he thinks it is. Like, but I still don't get how I'm on my deathbed. Just, God, please make me a little gay so I can live for 20 more years. Like, that's the trial. It doesn't make any fucking sense to me. That was the stupidest thing I've heard so far in this video. Let's keep watching.
So if Tember has a loss of faith because being gay in a hypersexualized world with a law of chastity from the Bible that he doesn't understand, I get that, because we live in a cruel, hypersexualized world. But I stare down the barrel of a chemotherapy pill every day that keeps me alive. I will die probably the same time my father does. It's a trial, and it sucks, but welcome to the club. That's why.
Oh, I have to stop you right there. To say that being gay is a trial is disgusting. That is offensive.
You don't
That
think
is like
dying
saying-
early is disgusting to me?
Let her finish.
You don't think dying early is disgusting to me? That's the point she's making, bro. Oh my goodness. This is the thing. And dude, we had it so deep in fundamentalist Mormonism too. And this stuff still exists clearly. This is not 1980s ideas. This is not 1900s ideas. This is modern time ideas where people really believe this stuff. And he's really trying to pretend that he understands the struggle. He has a struggle for sure. But comparing that to almost to make it feel like that you're dismissing the way you're going to be treated. First of all, we could have a whole other conversation with, you think you're going to be treated worse for having leukemia or not be able to go in the temple because you have leukemia? Give me a break, dude. Holy crap. I'm so glad she said that. That is disgusting, bro.
Me?
Let her finish.
I am saying that the way that the church sees people being born gay is like being born with cancer.
I think she was more upset that you basically codified it as an illness.
I'm saying if you have a loss of faith because of it.
Being gay is not a trial. Being gay in the church is a trial because of how they treat you and how they see it.
Mic drop. Being gay is not a trial. Being gay in the church is a trial. Yes, because of how they treat you and how they see it. Spot on.
How they see gay people is like being born with cancer. They're like, we're so sorry you were born this way. You can be that way, but don't do anything about it. I went to BYU. I took tests where they said,
by the way, just for context, BYU is, it's the Mormon school in Provo, Utah. But I got to show you something. They are my rival. So I went to the University of Utah, which is the other school. So in my church growing up, the regular LDS Church were considered like the apostates because they're the ones that stopped living the true laws of like polygamy and stuff like that. And BYU kind of represented Mormonism. And so that's one of the reasons I went to the University of Utah when I decided to go to college. Fun fact. So I could, be on the right team instead of Team BYU. We had all sorts of phrases. BY poo. Something like that. There's all sorts of phrases. I'm forgetting them right now. BYU smells like poo. Something like that.
But they had asked questions like, how do we treat members of the LGBTQ community? And the answer was to love them unconditionally, but understand that they will never be truly as happy as those who follow the Mormon religion. And so that is so painful to read and see because the trial isn't being gay. Actually, being gay is incredible. Being attracted to someone of the same sex is beautiful, and I've never been happier. The trial comes when the church tells you that that is wrong, and hopefully when you die, that cancer of being gay will be gone. That's the trial.
I disagree. I think we all have equal opportunity for happiness. I think happiness looks different for other people, and I can say that I had a semblance of happiness when I was with my boyfriends. And
but are you saying she's not really happy?
No.
Are you saying her happiness is fake?
I'm not. I believe you are truly happy. And
do you think she'll need to change fundamentally who she is as a person when we're talking about the next life in order to get that happiness that you're looking?
I'm so curious to see how this goes because this is what's happened. Like they're actually saying, no, what do you actually believe? Let's go. Let's dig here.
Bringing to the
I
table.
believe the Christian doctrine that sexual expression should only be between a man and a woman. But that, again, that's not an LDS doctrine.
So will Mormon Heavenly Father keep her out of the celestial kingdom if she continues to have gay relationships?
Well, he's not.
Wait, I asked him.
I am saying that
That's a yes or no. That's a yes or no.
Do I believe that Heavenly Father would keep her out of the celestial kingdom if she decides
If she continues to have lesbian relationships through her entire life and doesn't repent for them?
Yes, I believe that. Yes, but
yeah. See, the guys were trying to step in because Mormonism is so much of this protecting the view and the narrative, and they were starting off like, yes, treat everybody the same, welcome everybody. But when pressed, the real stuff comes out that actually, if you're gay, you can't go to heaven. Like, that's what they actually believe. And here's case in point. This guy, Tember, he literally, I mean, using his words, he's gay, but he's living with a woman because he's been conditioned to believe that that is the way he gets to heaven.
He'll keep her out of heaven. Celestial kingdom. Celestial kingdom. Celestial kingdom.
Yes, we all have a standard that we need.
She won't be able to live with her family forever, which is the Mormon promise.
No, but that's
because
of the doctrine of eternal family.
Hold on. Keep going.
I mean,
Jubilee, good job again. Have a mediator. See, like people are trying to jump in because they're trying to remove the tension, because that's an uncomfortable thing to really be pressing and saying, well, what do you actually believe? But having a mediator there to actually sit with it, I think that was a good move.
Yes, I believe Jesus is clear in the scriptures that there is a certain way to be able to return to the Father. And we have to.
And the way to return to the Father is you got to have straight missionary sex only. And in my case, in Fundamentalist Mormonism, have at least 3 wives. You know, that's how you're going to get to the celestial kingdom. Regular Mormons don't believe that anymore, but that's how. There's no other way.
To be willing to sacrifice everything. He says that we need to lay down our lives, deny ourselves to follow him in order to go to heaven. And whether you believe it's the celestial kingdom or heaven or whatever it is, there is a standard that we need to live by.
That standard, it also applies to several other religions. I just don't want that to get confused that it's specifically our Mormon religion.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. It's several other religions. It's not just
because of
this panel is about the LDS
right.
Church, though. We definitely can talk about the issues with the LDS Church.
There's 2 ways to be accepted in the Mormon Church. If you're gay, you either can be celibate or you can enter into a mixed orientation marriage. And I can tell you that there's like a 70% divorce rate for mixed orientation marriages. Let me just finish. It is true.
Not true.
So I have a PhD in clinical and counseling psychology. I interviewed 1,612 LGBT Mormons and ex-Mormons, and this is based on my published research data. And let me just finish. So you have one choice, which is to be in a mixed orientation marriage where 70% are going to fail and you're going to be likely miserable, or you can be celibate, and believe it or not, being celibate has worse depression, anxiety, and mental health outcomes as someone who's in a mixed orientation marriage. And that's why so many LGBTQ Mormons choose death.
And if you want personal, I'll give you personal. I am married to a man who used to be married to a woman, an amazing, amazing woman who God definitely had me find because of the situation that I had. I was able to have 2 biological children with this woman, and there is no way I believe in a God that is going to take away my husband and my 2 biological children that he absolutely gave me. I have them, I love them, and I will have them forever.
I think statistics are very important, but I'm very curious. Would you say you're happier now than before?
Yes, because my joy, the joy that I feel in Christ is so much deeper than the emotional, physical connection that I had with my boyfriends. It doesn't compare.
I have so much joy in Christ right now.
Can I just interject?
Let's just, and we can.
So it might be the only Mormon who didn't step forward. You know, I think 2 things can be true at once. So obviously, members of the church, by and large, are good people who don't hate anyone. But at the same time, we got to be realistic. Gay people aren't going anywhere and Mormons aren't going anywhere. So what do? I'm excited to see what happens, because clearly something's going to have to happen. Something's going to have to change, because these are 2 groups that are not leaving.
Masturbation is sinful. Agreeers, please step forward.
Why is that dude laughing? That's a Patreon special, I guess. One thing I just wanted to come back on this with, Mormon Obama, I'm going to call him, was saying, something's got to change.
I'm excited to see what happens, because clearly something's going to have to happen.
Something's going to change. And I agree with him. It will change. And how do I know it's going to change? Because there's a pattern set in the LDS Church. Here's the pattern. Here's the divine revelation from God. We have to follow this to the letter of the law. Except when we realize for a long time how wrong we are. And then we're going to have a new law that tries to fit it in. It is an evolving religion. And that might be considered a good thing, but it actually makes the whole house of cards eventually fall down, because we're like, we need a religion that has modern prophets to tell us how to live. And you would think that if you have prophets that are speaking directly to God, you're going to have good ideas, advanced ideas, ideas that are pushing humanity forward. I would say that by and large, as a society, we've certainly moved forward on views towards, let's say, race issues, and outside of this conversation, like acceptance around, you know, the LGBTQ community from where it has been in the past. Why wasn't that led on by the Mormon Church? Like, why wasn't it the church coming forward and saying, yo, we're going to give the we're going to put, you know, we're going to give women the priesthood. We're going to give black people the priesthood. We're going to accept homosexuality as like a common thing. Something that's not how it goes. Instead, they say, they always start off opposing it, and it's only when there's so much pressure and they're losing members and it's obviously wrong that then they have some revelation coming around and saying, oh, this, I mean, the perfect example of it is polygamy, where it was talked about that this is the way to get to the highest heaven, the celestial kingdom. They literally called it celestial marriage, plural or celestial marriage. Those were synonymous terms. And now celestial marriage, if you talk to LDS members, in fact, if an LDS member is watching this, like, celestial marriage does not mean polygamy at all. It means blah, blah, blah. That has been adjusted. Polygamy, plural marriage, was the standard synonymous term with celestial marriage. If you don't believe me, go search the Journal of Discourses of all your earlier prophets. Anyway, this happens all the time in LDS culture, where here's the doctrine, it's from God himself. Oh, frick, we're wrong. We have to find some way to cover it up and move on. And then there's some other narrative that's like, no, we've always been accepting of these people. No. Anyway, let's move on.
Masturbation is sinful. Agreeers, please step forward.
For the record, it is. How silly. Masturbation in Mormonism is sinful. You should check out my episode with Chrissy, my friend Chrissy, who is now an ex-Mormon sex worker, if you want to hear more about that. Dude, I just have to, even though we weren't even there for the prompt, that dude, he was so uncomfortable. What's his name? Cardin? He was so uncomfortable even hearing it that he's just giggling like a little child, I guess. I don't know. I think there's something telling in that about how there are these topics that are like untouchable. And so it's just like hearing the word masturbation is like, oh my gosh, are we going to really talk about that? Dude, it's okay. And we already know. You beat off in the last week. That's okay. Maybe a couple times. That's okay. Do your thing, bro. I'm not going to tell on you.
Women and men are equal in the church. Agreeers, please step forward.
Ah, jeez.
This is one of the most glorious doctrines of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Is there's no other church or religion on the earth that teaches that men and women eventually can become gods, co-creators, and
So are you saying, Tember, that they're eventually gonna be equal? Like, it's such a beautiful doctrine because they're eventually gonna be equal. I do not envy being a Mormon on this prompt, because you got a lot of upward battle here of trying to come up with some reasoning as to how men and women are equal, like on the spot. And you know, when you hear that prompt, if you're a Mormon, you're like, shit, I'm supposed to walk forward on this, but I'm going to look like an idiot if I don't know exactly what to say. Like, this would be a hard prompt to do. I'm very, very curious to see what they're going to do here.
Co-equal partners. I mean, we do believe currently that we are co-equal partners already, just different responsibilities, but we both have the same ability to become kings and queens, priests and priestesses. And that's the ultimate goal.
That's such hogwash. We're already equal. We just have different responsibilities. Like, follow the dictates of your husband to the letter of the law and be obedient to your husband. This is something that was talked about heavily over the pulpit in my church. Women are meant to be as obedient to their husbands as they are to Jesus. Here's the problem with that. Jesus, is he coming and giving accountability for bullshit ideas? No. And men are being like, we're supposed to be in charge of you. And so the idea that women and men are equal in the Mormon Church, even modern Mormon Church, let alone Fundamentalist Mormon Church, is laughable.
That's my goal.
I wholeheartedly believe that men and women in the church are equal, but I think it's important to define what equal is, because I'm immediately aware of what the secular anti-Mormon argument.
I don't believe he really believes that they're equal, this Cardin guy. There are these things you can pick up when you're reading body language and listening to someone speak. They say, if you hear somebody say, can I be honest with you? Or honestly, I don't want to lie to you, and then they say the thing. Like, when they're saying things like that, those could actually be tells on what they really think and feel. And I just noticed that this guy, instead of being like, yeah, men and women are equal, he used, I wholeheartedly believe that they're equal. I think that's a tell. I mean, I'm being a little bit speculative here, but I think that's a tell that I don't think he really believes it. My 2 cents.
Mormon arguments are. At the same time, I look at our faith, and we're a faith that has codified this idea, as the Apostle Paul said, that we will be co-participants in his glory. And we have a relief society, which is the largest women's organization in the world. We're one of the only faiths that's mainstream or large enough to have national recognition that I know of that has a doctrine of Heavenly Mother that is actually sung about in our official hymn book. You look at women, they don't need to receive the priesthood in order to go to the temple. We're told our priesthood as men that we hold is useless unless it's applied through long suffering and patience. And we're constantly told that you are living the Adam and Eve archetype. And unless you make a decision mutually with your wife, which is the ultimate definition of equality, it's what we call unrighteous dominion. I'm very aware that some people say, oh, because women can't have the priesthood, that you're a second-class citizen. And there's some cultural arguments that people might try and bring in, but in the codified faith, women enjoy, sometimes will complain about almost preferential treatment.
Does anyone know who the Relief Society president is? Like, can you name the woman that is the Relief Society president over the whole church?
I know it was Jean B. Bingham. I don't.
Holy crap! That's such a dude. This is such a oh man. I do not envy these guys. That are. This is my point. There's all these things on the surface. They're like, yeah, women are totally equal. They're just as good. And then so the Relief Society is a basic, like, common structure within the church that is basically a female-led organization. And they don't even know the name of the leader of that of the Relief Society. And yet they're just talking just a second ago on how they would certainly know, okay, here's the prophet, here's the first presidency, the dudes, they would know those dudes' names like that.
I don't know who it is right now, I'll be honest with you.
I definitely think that men and women are treated very differently.
With that said, I can't name the 12 apostles. I can't name the 12 apostles, so
and yet you could...
Whatever, dude. Whatever, dude. This guy's so full of crap. I'm gonna name the 12 apostles. I'm just an idiot. No, you're not, Cardin. You're not an idiot. Didn't fool me there. Yeah, if you sat with it, you would know the dudes' names. You don't know the ladies' names. There's a reason there.
Could name probably the first three, President Nelson and his counselors.
I could name the prophet, yes, but at any given time, I confess.
Let's stay on track. Let's stay on track.
I do not think men and women are treated equally, and it goes beyond the priesthood. It also goes to your duties as a woman. I think a lot of the time women are told, I mean, a lot of women go to BYU or college just to find a spouse, and they're told not to continue their education once they get married and to let the man take over and be the main breadwinner. So I think that there is a difference between the duties of men and women in the church.
I think that's just a general critique of Judeo-Christian traditional household standards, I guess, or customs. I do believe women have been marginalized and men have asserted their authority and power over them in unrighteous ways and unrighteous dominion, right? But I think that has definitely changed, especially not to get into the specifics of the temple, but the temple used to say that women are basically subject to their husbands and have access to God through their husband.
And they would veil their face.
Dude, so this is what I would call another slip. I think other Mormons would be like, holy shit, he just told something of one of our secrets inside the temple. So there's all these ordinances and sacred, that's how they, things that happen. Listen to what he just said used to be taught. Women are subjected to their husbands. By the way, that is still how it is done in Fundamentalist Mormonism. And where did that come from? The LDS Church. Which, again, is just another piece of evidence that the LDS Church slowly changes and then tries to pretend like it's always been that way. But I can't believe he even mentioned this. I bet the other dudes, when they're hearing him say that, are like, oh crap, that's not good to voice that. Because, yeah, that's a slip.
I do believe women have been marginalized and men have asserted their authority and power over them in unrighteous ways and unrighteous dominion, right? But I think that has definitely changed, especially not to get into the specifics of the temple, but the temple used to say that women are basically subject to their husbands and have access to God through their husband.
And they would veil their faces as well.
That's not there anymore. And I think that...
I can't believe he's using this as a justification of how not sexist the LDS Church is. That's amazing. This right here. Oh, this is like Mormon comedic gold. I can't believe that he just used this as this is proof that we're no longer sexist because we used to be so fucking sexist that we even said women are subjected to their husbands. The only way they get to heaven is through the husbands. And we don't do that anymore. So we're so good. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
That is a positive step that the church is coming to acknowledge that, hey, if Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother are co-creators, co-gods, she's not subject to Heavenly Father.
In Judaism, really quickly, women can be rabbis. And I don't know if within the next decade...
Depending on the sect.
Sure. I can't see women being bishops.
Personally, when I go to my church, when I'm in my ward, when I come to church, I sit down, everybody leading the church is a male, and the only female you'll see on the stand, she is playing the organ. Mm-hmm. And when she's not playing the organ, she comes back down and she'll sit with her family.
Is that why I want to know why you chose to stay back, because I thought that was very significant.
Because I agree. I don't believe they're equal. Just like...
This is interesting, just to point out extra. Yeah, this is the one female on the Mormon side that she's an active member. She's an active member for the church. She's been standing up for a lot of the prompts in defense of the church. And she stayed back. She's yeah, they're not the same. They're not treated equally. She's a member, giving the voice on the Mormon side, but still says that. Yeah, that's telling. That's definitely significant.
What I said, she goes up, she plays the organ, she comes back down, and all you're left with is men until other women come up later on to bear their testimony or sing something.
How have you felt your involvement has been as a woman?
My involvement? I was involved in the youth. I was a secretary, only secretary of the women's, obviously. Sometimes we get combined with the men, but oftentimes it's kind of you kind of stay in your own sex group. So you're always with women, and the men are always with the men, the boys are with the boys, the girls are with the girls, unless you're like adolescents, and obviously they're all together. But I feel that there is definitely segregation within women and men in the church. I do believe that they hold more power. I feel like it's not as inclusive as it should be.
So it seems like both sides can agree that, you know, the debate is on whether it's unequal or not, but they do have different roles and responsibilities. In that instance,
I think
I would like to speak on
did that
that.
impact whether you left or not?
I think it did impact my involvement in the church in general, because what I love the way that you're explaining is like a kid can sit in church and see who is in charge. A child can. Even being raised, you know, becoming a teenager, you were only involved with the women. Even be like all of these levels, all the way up to a level of an adult, of being married, of you can only practice your sexuality once you're married to a man. Only can you have sexual relationships once you're married to a man. Like, it's very clear that we as women are seen very differently. And not only that, but even the concept of a heavenly mother that we talk about, they just told us that we're not allowed to pray even to a heavenly mother. We're not even allowed to, it's not brought up, we don't talk about it. And that just so clearly displays the difference of we only speak to God the Father. We don't speak to God Mother, we don't talk about her. And what's funny is it's all of the white men who are telling us why. It's always the white men who are telling us where our level is. It's the white men who are saying, oh no, you have equal priesthood, but you can't sit on the stand, you can't pass the sacrament, you can't bless people, can't baptize people.
I'm sorry, but that is a Judeo multiracial biblical teaching that wasn't just instituted by white men. That you may disagree with it, and that's fine.
Sexist nonetheless.
You may disagree with it, but the fact of the matter is that there always is someone who presides, okay? And the scriptures say that the one who presides in the household is the man, but presiding doesn't mean is higher than, okay, or has more power over. It means the husband has to.
It definitely means has more power over. Dude, I don't know I haven't talked to a single Mormon or ex-Mormon that would think differently than that, because that's one of the reasons it gets so dicey, and is because those presiding over the unders, those that are presiding over other people, do bad things. And so they certainly are viewed as higher up if they're presiding over the, like, whether it's a church position, having priesthood, and certainly in the dynamics between men and women, husband and wives.
To ensure that the needs of the household are taken care of spiritually and temporally, and he works with his wife to do that. But it doesn't mean he has more power over her.
But
I'm actually curious to hear his thoughts. As
this little conversation right here is a microcosm of my Mormon experience, which is it's men having the power, men dominating the conversation, and then telling women why they're more important while they're mostly silent.
When you were speaking about Heavenly Mother,
That's such a good point. Dude, all the women they share, like, men, when they were talking, like, this is why women are so important, and all the women are like, actually, I feel like I'm not as important.
I first was speaking with the missionaries and learning more about the church. Obviously, you're always talking about Jesus Christ and the Heavenly Father and all the Holy Ghost and all these things. And I don't know where, but I was thinking about it, I came across it, and I was like, well, I wanted to learn more about Heavenly Mother, and it was probably a 1.5 minute conversation because, we don't know anything about Heavenly Mother. I was like, well, why do we know all these things and we don't know anything about Heavenly Mother? I was like, she should be equally important. I mean, she birthed the person we worship, so I couldn't fathom how we knew little to nothing about
It's not even that we speak less of her, it's we don't speak
of her.
Yes. We're not allowed to. We're not even allowed to pray to her.
Well, I would, just because you're not allowed to pray to something other than, and by the way, not allowed, I think that's a misrepresentation too. You have free agency, you can do whatever you want, but just because we don't have codified prayer to somebody other than our Father in heaven.
Dude, Cardin, no you don't. This is one of those things again, like, you have free agency, you can do what you want. And then you start pressing it and like, oh, can we actually do what we want? Like, and it's like, actually, no, you're doing the wrong thing. You're gonna go to hell. It goes against the rules. It's just so disingenuous, what I hear coming out of this guy.
Doesn't mean that we hate, like,
But the prophet told us
saint.
not to. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Jesus
I
told
actually
us
got a
not.
question for you. I got a question for you girls. The division, okay, so this always atrophies into a priesthood argument. But do you think it's possible to have equality with a division of labor? Or would equality be achieved in your mind with women receiving the priesthood? And then I have a follow-up. This just came into my mind, this isn't a gotcha, but what would satisfy your definition of equality? Must the women be given the priesthood and that's the hill we're dying on here? Or is there any other definition that would satisfy you?
I think just being able to see at least one woman up there leading the congregation for at least half of the
Well,
church
define
time.
leading, like what's...
Having an important job other than
I think
playing
the
organ.
women are only allowed to be leaders of the women, whereas the men can be leaders of both men and women
Lead
above all.
the church.
So if women could have higher up roles where they are given more responsibility and more people in the congregation to care for and look after and given more
positions of power.
Positions
Something
of power.
equivalent to
Yeah.
the priesthood. Maybe
Okay.
not the priesthood, but at least equivalent.
So then what would you call, like, for example, Sister Espinaus? I can't name the heads of Relief Society, but the young women I can because I'm a little bit more aware of it because I have children that are youth. But Sister Espinaus, Emily Bell Freeman, all of these women that have wildly powerful positions within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I mean, Emily Bell Freeman is probably one of the single most powerful Mormons in the world. I would say if she put something out on Instagram, it would probably have almost as much pull as Russell M. Nelson in the Pacific Northwest and this side of the Rockies. So if we were to...
Oh, we have to watch that again, because again, watch her reaction to what he is saying right now. And she is also still a Mormon. Let's just watch that again. That was interesting.
These women that have wildly powerful positions within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I mean, Emily Bell Freeman is probably one of the single most powerful Mormons in the world. I would say if she put something out on Instagram, it would probably have almost as much pull as Russell M. Nelson in the Pacific Northwest and this side of the Rockies. So if...
She's like, dude, I'm Mormon. I agree with you in a lot of things, but no, that's not. Yeah. What is that? Bella? I think Bella's her name. Oh, that's just funny. Yeah, that reaction from Bella. Holy crap, that's so telling. Just hearing this Cardin guy. Okay, let's keep going.
If we were to give just women the priesthood magically all of a sudden right now, it seems like these arguments kind of come from a politically secular leftist stance of like representation, which I get, I understand. Movies are cooler when you see somebody that looks like you in it. I get that. But then would you want to preach from a Bible that's almost written wholly and completely by men? At that point, would the demands of equality require that we have equal representation in the books? There's only one book of Esther. Now we'll take one book out of the Septuagint and ignore the Book of Mormon because there's not a single one that's written by a woman. Like, I don't see, unless we accept the dichotomy that there can be equality with a division of labor, I don't see where it ends even after giving women the priesthood. And this is an on.
So I don't see how this ends. So let's just keep it unequal, dude. I don't even get what this dude's point is, except no, we're pretty equal, except we're kind of not, but maybe we kind of are, and we have division of labor, and besides, what would you guys even want? Would it ever even turn into equal? Dude, let's start here. Women and men are not equal in the church. Let's just acknowledge that, and then look at moving forward.
An honest question.
I think it's even taking a bigger step back from even just having a position of power. But like, first of all, yes, I do think that women should be able to be a position of power. It is the whole doctrine of the church that how women are seen and how they were treated. It's bigger than just a position. It's how they are treated. It's like these are their responsibilities. This is the woman's responsibility. In the doctrine of the family proclamation, it says very clearly what a woman's job is and what a man's job is. And guess who wrote that? Bunch of white men. Did any of the women get to write that or present it? No. The men did. Do women get to even be a prophet? No, there's never been a woman prophet. And so we always...
And let me just give some insight to this, because the LDS Church has been so goddamn hypocritical here with their views on the way women are treated. Like, there's a reason there's a lot of women that end up leaving the LDS Church. Growing up in fundamentalism, it's like even way worse. And the thing that the LDS Church has been trying to do for probably a couple generations, maybe even longer, 4 generations maybe, is distancing themselves from fundamentalism, what I'm from, and what they are from. And that they're like totally separate. But they're not. Fundamentalism is essentially a time capsule of the LDS Church at a certain time period. And the reason that is important is because there's so many apologists these days that talk about things in a way that it never even happened. And this is one of those things. Like, the history of Mormonism and how they have treated women has been wildly sexist. And it continues so clearly in Fundamentalist Mormonism, where it's being preached over the pulpit today, telling women that they need to submit themselves to their husbands, and other things like, you know what I see? Like, this is one of my church leaders. If you wear pants, that tells me you're rebellious. You're a rebellious woman. And you need to submit yourselves to your husband. Like, and where did that come from? It has been passed down from the LDS Church.
We always have these assumptions, but it really is how women are treated in general and how they are seen of their position in the church as a whole, not just by, okay, you can be over all the women, congrats, you have a big Instagram. It's bigger than that.
It's okay for the doctrine to change.
There's scriptural precedent for it changing, and one of the most beautiful aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the fact that we have and rely upon modern prophets, and we take what they say seriously and look forward to that prophetic revelation. But at the end of the day, we still have to go home and get that same revelation. We have to get that same answer from God directly from Him that dovetails with that revelation, so that we know in our core that that is what God wants for His children. We don't have a static God.
I disagree there, because God is unchangeable, as it states in the scriptures. There are eternal principles.
I seriously think that, I think it happened once with Bella, where she said a slip up of what like most everyday Mormons may not want them to say, like true things, like actual beliefs that they have. And here's another one. This isn't as big of one, but Tember here is talking about God is unchanging. This was a big thing that was talked about in Mormonism from the very beginning, that God is unchanging. And the reason that we needed to have a prophet in Joseph Smith come back and restore the gospel is because it fell away. People did whatever they did, and so the authority of God left the earth, and it was to be restored. And in fundamentalism, that tradition that Tember's talking about here is so clear that God does not change. Yes, we might have, it was like, yes, we can have modern day revelation, but modern day revelation can only build upon, it cannot retract. And the LDS Church is full of retractions, aka polygamy, aka not giving priesthood to, if you're from the African race, like so many things. Like, what are they going to do? Like, it's just a matter of time that they are going to have to adjust with some of these other issues like LGBTQ and women's rights and stuff like that, because they're behind. They're behind. And it's just so fascinating to see how that is argued, because it's so clear for anybody on the outside looking in, but people that are inside, it's like, no. But anyway, my main point here is, yeah, all the changes are not build-upons these days. It's just like coming to the party. And here's a belief that has been super deep with Mormonism, as Tember says here, that God is the same. He does not change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
That are eternal. They never change. But how those principles are applied can change over time. But the eternal principles remain the same, period. If we don't have any objective, solid, eternal truth, then everything is relative, and relativity leads to chaos.
We're talking about understanding God and eternal principles. I mean, we're talking about cosmic law, multi-dimensions, everything so expansive. And all of that information, part of it is being channeled through the mind of fallible people who are writing things.
Tell me, as soon as I say this, you're not going to be able to unhear it. Tell me that this guy, you could not see him running for some sort of office, some political office. The way he speaks, I'm envious, genuinely. He's like the Mormon Obama. I could listen to Obama speak for, I wish Obama had a podcast. I love the way he speaks. And the way this guy speaks reminds me of Obama. So, Mormon Obama, keep it up.
Things down in a fallible language being interpreted to people with fallible understanding.
Modern times, you need modern measures. So it's useful that we have prophets on this earth to this day, because everything is ever changing. I mean, you look at our language and look at the way it used to be, look how it is now. It's just, everybody needs an updated interpretation.
One of my favorite things about the Mormon Church is how much has changed. And I can think about 3 issues that really troubled me when I was an Orthodox devout member. One was when I went through the temple for the first time, and I had to slit my throat as part of, use my thumb as a sign to slit my throat as part of a covenant I was making in the temple. I was super glad when I found out they took that out in 1990. The second was, I'm old enough to remember when black Mormons were not allowed to hold the priesthood. They were not allowed to hold certain offices.
And this is one of those things. So they're talking about black people could not hold the priesthood, and they couldn't, and it was changed. And now there are a lot of apologists that have come out of the woodwork saying, no, they always were, like they find some way to explain it away. And again, as the ex-Fundamentalist Mormon boy, I'm inconvenient for the LDS Church, because I'm like the Fundamentalist Mormons are like the shadow that the LDS Church wishes it could get away from but can't. But if you go into an FLDS or a Fundamentalist Mormon church house today, you know what you're going to see? A lot of just this, a lot of white faces. You're not going to see anybody that is African American. That would be one of the rarest things. There was never a black person in my church growing up. And the reason is this. It was literally talked about, one of the most racist teachings, that black people are second-class citizens, and they fought to, like they didn't fight on Jesus' side in the war in heaven. There's this magical war in heaven that happened, and because we fought for Jesus' side, that's why all of us are white. If you're white, you fought for Jesus. If you're black, it's because you didn't choose God or Jesus' side. You just sat on the fence. But God is so merciful. He's still going to give you a body, but you don't get to have the same blessings as white people until white people get all of their blessings. So white people get to go first, and then here come the black people, and black people don't ever get to hold any sort of priesthood position. That's what I was taught growing up in Fundamentalist Mormonism. And where did that come from? The LDS Church.
Is in the church, and when they were kept out of the temple with just basic temple blessings. And I was super happy in 1978 when they allowed black people to be members in full standing. the final one, my grandmother was the daughter of a third wife. So I come directly from a polygamous ancestry.
Hey, guess what, John? You and me both. I also come from polygamous ancestry, except actually 4 moms, brother. Still to this day. 4 moms, 44 siblings.
And it wasn't until I was 30 or 31 that I found out that the founder of Mormonism, Joseph Smith, married over 30 women, 14-year-olds, other men's wives.
This is bananas. So what this point that he's bringing up, he did not know until he was in his 30s that the founding member of the church was a polygamist. This happens all the time, where the history is not even discussed. It's wild that they don't talk about this to their members. They're like, hide it. And I think that's what makes ex-Mormons, because if you're in the church and you believe it a certain way, and then you start hearing people saying, you guys were polygamists and stuff like that, you're like, no, we're not polygamists. And at first you're probably just saying the narratives that you have heard so many times from your friends and from other church leaders, but then you do your own digging, be like, oh shit, we kind of were. Whoa. And it's that whiplash of like, why are we not talking about this? You feel lied to. And then you're like, well, shit. Am I part of something that's full of shit? And then you leave. Like, that happens all the time. I have friends that was exactly their experience. And again, as a fundamentalist Mormon, I feel like I'm kind of growing up in fundamentalist Mormonism. I have like a front row seat of all the things that the LDS Church keeps hidden today, because all the things they're hiding are front and center discussed within fundamentalist Mormonism.
That information was withheld from me for 30 years. And I was super happy that over time the church has distanced itself from polygamy, because I think it's one of the most horrendous teachings that the church has ever had. So I'm super grateful the church changes, and it does.
I have to push back, because I think there's some things that are misconstrued as doctrine that are policies.
Dude, as doctrines, policies, so he's probably going to come out and start saying, again, there's so many different ways the church has tried to spin the polygamy issue. As, I mean, literally, like, they're going to say it was never doctrinal. Some say it's because there was a shortage of men. And because of the shortage of men, all these women had to marry all the men. Oh, really? Or Joseph Smith got caught banging a 14-year-old and then had to cover his tracks because it made him not look like a prophet, and then he had to invent this whole reason that an angel came with a drawn sword and told him he had to do it. That's a whole other conversation. But there's so many ways to get it swept under the rug, and that's what it sounds like this guy Tember's about to jump into. It's like people misconstrue doctrine and policy. Listen, Mormonism and polygamy were once upon a time synonymous because it was a doctrine. Literally, there are teachings of the earlier prophets within the Mormon Church that say this is a celestial law. Polygamy is a celestial law. It is the way to get to the highest heaven. It's the way God lives. It's the reason all these polygamists are in the Bible, because it's the way to live. It's the reason Joseph Smith had 30 wives. It's the reason Brigham Young had many wives. It was a doctrine. And then God came and said, oh, I changed my mind. And that's what made fundamentalism start, because they're like, wait, we can't change. I mean, how can we change something like that? We've been taught for generations that this is the way to get to the celestial kingdom, and you're just changing it on us? God is the same today and yesterday and forever, right? Anyway, let's see what he says.
And we see that as the church.
Which thing that I just said was a misconstruction?
Blacks not receiving the priesthood.
Isn't that just a fact?
Well, no, but you're saying it was a doctrine that changed.
Well,
that was a doctrine that changed, bro. What are you talking about?
Well, the first presidency, the prophet and the first and second counselor prior to 1978, on multiple occasions signed statements saying that it was doctrine that black people could not be members in full standing. That's the first presidency in the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah, and what we were taught the exact same way that they mentioned earlier, like treat all people from the LGBTQ community the same. We were taught if somebody's black, treat them well. But the way we were taught to look at them is that they were born with, like, feel bad for them. They were born with this curse because they didn't fight too valiantly, and they're going to have to wait until everybody else has their chance to accept Jesus and blah, blah, blah. And that black people, like, literally, when Barack Obama became president, like, during the campaign, we thought, like, my family was like, oh, there's no way he's going to win because black people can never lead. Like, that's what my family taught. That's what people in the church were saying. And then Obama won. It was like, what? It was just proof that the world was going bananas. But this drives me up the wall. Like, just do a little bit of research on the church to realize, yeah, this was a doctrine and it changed.
40s and 50s.
Yeah, but that was a corruption of Joseph Smith baptized free men. He had a presidential platform based upon abolition. The Mormon Church was basically an abolitionist entity that the government feared in the West for its first 50 years. The fact that it adopted some bad ideas.
I want to read something. Here is a quote. If Utah was this was before Utah was a state. If Utah was admitted into the Union as a sovereign state, and we chose to introduce slavery here, it is not their business, talking about the federal government, to meddle with it. And even if we treat our slaves in an oppressive manner, it is still none of their business and they ought not to meddle with it. Who's this quote by? Brigham Young. The only prophet before him was Joseph Smith himself. And this is Brigham Young saying this sort of nonsense. And so hearing him say, no, it was a perversion and they were basically an abolitionist culture is just utter hogwash. And again, it's always difficult when navigating this type of conversation with LDS Church members because you never know how much of it is like bad faith understanding or bad faith trying to misconstrue the way things worked, or if you almost feel bad for them because of how their church covers for the way things were done or come up with all these spin narratives. But that quote from Brigham Young, like, you can find that on Google. It's in the Journal of Discourses. And of course, Journal of Discourses is not canonized, but it's still church sermons of church prophets speaking things of what they believe. So anyway, I'm going to continue.
The fact that it adopted some bad ideas of the curse of Cain because of Protestant influence coming from the South, especially when Parley P. Pratt returned as a missionary from the South, and the pressures put on Brigham Young as a governor of the state of Deseret, that is an abuse of history.
But it's your prophets, the people that you believe claim spoke to God and that I used to believe, they're the ones signing these statements. It's David O. McKay. It's people that you sustain as propheters and revelators. So how do you know when they're speaking as a man? How do you when they're excluding an entire race of people from full participation? How do you know they're speaking for God or speaking for themselves? Until
that is a solid point from John. How do you know? Like, again, Mormonism is like beautiful narrative on the surface. We have prophets that tell us, like, so that the world can evolve and so we can hear God's word. And then the prophet says nonsense. And then you're like, is this actually from God? Because here's what I can tell you has been, like, when the prophets have said nonsense, at the time, they like double down. And it's like, no, we're not gonna bend to the times. We're not bending to what is fashionable for society to today, because it's God's laws. And then the LDS Church finally changes. Like, it's just so fascinating the way this works. And again, I just have to, I take pause because I don't know, like, when I see a church member, a member of the LDS Church, I don't know when they're having arguments if I should like provide counter examples to what they're saying, if they're actually having those beliefs, and if they're having them with deliberate bad faith arguments, or if they just simply don't know.
Until the social...
I answered that right at the beginning of this whole entire prompt. It's a two-part path. You receive revelation from a prophet, you go home, you pray about it, you confirm it. Like, I actually really appreciate this question because it gets to the root of epistemology.
Should we let Kwaku answer this?
I think the human ego speaks when we want our environment and the bubble we're in, because everyone lives in a bubble. We don't want that bubble to change, no matter what. Human beings are prideful.
Solid point. Solid point, Kwaku.
Well, human beings have ego. Everyone does. I look at some of the things our church leaders said, David O. McKay, right? Brigham Young, Joseph Fielding Smith. I know they weren't, singing Kumbaya with black people. I get that. I totally get that. But at the same time, I understand that people are also products of their environment. And I don't want to condemn someone who's not here to defend themselves. And in the same way, 100 years from now, someone will look at us and they'll say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys were using your Cobalt iPhones built by child slaves. Please don't deny my humanity 100 years from now.
Well, look at a New Testament example, Peter. Peter was the leading apostle during the time of the original apostles, right? And he was making Gentile converts get circumcised. And Paul confronts him to the face, saying that this isn't necessary. So you have disagreement within the apostleship. And
but doesn't the Book of Mormon say that God cursed white people with dark skin for their wickedness? Isn't that in your scriptural canon?
It depends on... Yeah, okay. Fundamentalist Mormon coming in here now, because again, I'm going to share a quick story I've talked about on other people's shows like Cults to Consciousness, which is a fantastic show. You guys should check it out. Here's what we were taught when it comes to race. Where does it all originate? It all originated in heaven. This was the story. Brace yourselves. Before the world was, God our Father is a celestialized being, and we were his spirit children. We did not have physical bodies, but in Mormonism, God has a physical body. It's celestialized, it's perfected. Being his spirit children, we wanted a body. And so we looked to God and said, hey, God, we want to have a body. How can we get a body like you? And he says, well, we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan. And so he asked his spirit babies, us, what the plan should be. And up shot his hand, our brother Lucifer. This is what we were taught. And it originated in early LDS history. Somebody raised their hand. It was Lucifer. He says, here's my idea, God. My idea is we're going to save everybody. They can go to earth. They don't, even if they choose evil, they all get to come back into your presence, Lord. But because this is my idea, God, and it's such a good idea, I think I should get all the honor and all the glory. And God was like, okay, cool. Thanks, Lucifer. Anybody else? Up shoots his hand, Jesus. Our brother Jesus. Because in Mormonism, Jesus is not God. Jesus is just like the rest of us. He is the Son of God like the rest of us. And Jesus says, here's my plan, God. Everybody goes to earth. They choose good over evil. If they choose evil, they do not come back into your presence. And if they choose good, they can. But those that are have a softened heart and deny something or confess me or you, that they can still be saved. And so I am willing to sacrifice myself for all of humanity, for those that actually do want to be saved. But God, instead of me having the honor and glory, all the glory be to you, God. And so those are the two plans in a nutshell. Lucifer's plan, everybody gets to get saved no matter what, and he gets to have the credit. Jesus' plan, he's going to sacrifice himself, and God gets the credit. What does God choose? Jesus's plan. God says, yeah, Jesus, your plan is the one we're going with. That's a good idea. Let's create the universe. And after that, Lucifer's kind of bummed. It's kind of like not getting investment on Shark Tank or something. Like, my idea's a better idea. They don't see it. And so Lucifer's mad. And in fact, he's creating a fuss in heaven. He's actually trying to get converts to his idea. And many people started to take his sides. Brothers and sisters, like spirit brothers and sisters of ours, took Jesus' side. And then there was like a heavenly civil war. This is literally what we were taught. It's like a heavenly civil war between those that took Jesus' side and Lucifer's side. There was actually broken up into there's like 3/3 of people in heaven that participated or didn't participate. I'll talk about that in just a sec. But there was like this war in heaven. And those of us that fought for Jesus' side defeated Lucifer and everybody on Lucifer's side, and they got cast down to hell. And that's how hell was born, is we fought Lucifer and put him to hell, and then all of the people that were on Lucifer's side, they become hell's angels, or all the demons of hell. And then, so there was 1/3 of the entire host of heaven. Well, that's what we were taught. 1/3 of the entire host of heaven was cast out down to hell along with Jesus. And it was 1/3, me, I was one of those souls. That's what I was taught. I obviously don't believe any of this, but I was like, I was taught that I and everybody else that looks like me fought for Jesus' side. Now, I said there was 3/3. So 1/3's out, down to hell, 1/3 fought. Well, who's the other third? The other third, there was 1/3 of people that couldn't choose. They couldn't pick Jesus' side or Lucifer's side. Like, I don't know. They're both my brothers. I don't really know. God. So I'm kind of going, in my indecision, I'm going against our Father God. And I feel kind of bad for that, but I can't decide. And the term we were used growing up was, these people sat on the fence. And who are the ones that sat on the fence? Those are black people. That's literally what we were taught. Black people were people in heaven that didn't choose a side, and they sat on the fence. And so God cursed them with black skin as a mark of their not choosing his side or whatever. And so in this life, and dude, I could do a whole episode on the racist nonsense in this that has persisted from the LDS Church and spilling into Fundamentalist Mormonism, because that's what Fundamentalist Mormonism is like a time capsule of beliefs from the LDS Church. But there were teachings, and they still exist today in fundamentalism, that if you're white, you cannot mix your blood with the seed of Cain, aka black people, because then you're going to be cursed with the same curse too. Fucking bananas. It's insanity. And what we're seeing right here in this video is what has happened after these stories have evolved and changed, is there are now Mormon apologists that try to pretend that it didn't happen, or if it did happen, it was like men failing versus it being an actual true doctrine of the church, when it was absolutely talked about as, this is the way we believe. This is what we are, and this is what black people are, which of course is utter nonsense. Just additional context to this whole issue.
It depends on your interpretation.
I've never read it that way. What's your interpretation?
Well, there's scriptures in the Old Testament where certain individuals say there's a skin of blackness upon me that is totally symbolic of being in a state of distress, or
Solomon, I am black but comely.
Yeah.
So what did God do to the Lamanites in the Book of Mormon in your interpretation? Did he not turn their skin dark because of their wickedness? Even though the book says that?
No, I think it was a spiritual mark, just like with Cain. We don't know.
But it says skin of blackness in the Book of Mormon. It says skin of blackness.
It's an idiom. There are many idioms that are mistranslated.
Doesn't that feel convenient to call it an idiom?
No,
when it says skin of blackness?
Because you need to...
It was not an idiom. It was talked about and taught as this is the way that there was no confusion around it. Golly.
And when it talks about their dark skin, that God made them dark so that they'll be loathsome to the white-skinned Nephites?
Because if you're a biblical and Greek scholar, you realize there are idioms like this one, which is well known in ancient scripture as being a symbol of being a distress.
As a dark, can I speak? I've never read it that way. The Book of Mormon is by and large about Native Americans. And whenever we bring up the subject of race, suddenly it turns into Europeans being switched into sub-Saharan Africans. But that's not what the book is saying. When I read the Book of Mormon, I'm seeing Nephi, which is where this comes from, the cursing. Nephi hates the Lamanites. He's finding every single way to dislike them. And then his brother Jacob comes and says, hey, you should not hate them because they're darker than you. And then Samuel the Lamanite, the dark prophet, is speaking to the white Nephites. And he's saying, hey, no, you're actually cursed. And they say, let's remove him from the record. And Jesus comes in and says, put him back in the record. It's showing a history of prejudice and how to overcome it.
So what is skin
for? That is just not true. It's just not true. In fact, I'm going to take this one step deeper to what we were taught. We were taught that Cain, he killed Abel. And so that's like a whole thing. But Ham, when Ham was cursed by Noah, he was cursed with dark skin, and that was actually a necessity. This is the way we were taught, again, from the way the LDS Church taught it in early history, that Ham needed to get his skin cursed so that when the floods came, there was somebody to continue on that seed so that, black babies in heaven could come to earth. But here's the other thing. If you really want to talk about how deep this goes, it was taught in my church in fundamentalism that when all is said and done, not only are, like, whether it happens in this life or the next life, that if a black person was so faithful to the church, to Mormonism, to Jesus, to the true Church of God, which is Mormonism that Joseph Smith established, the curse would be lifted. And what's going to happen when the curse is lifted? Their skin color is going to change. Their skin color is going to go from black to white. And that's why in the scriptures that the LDS Church eventually changed is white and delightsome. Now they changed it to pure and delightsome. But it was white and delightsome. Like all this in a modern era, looking at it, is like insanity. And yet, it was clearly taught, and is still being clearly taught, in fundamentalist Mormon churches today. And so hearing nowadays members talk about it as though it never happened or was discussed that way is just flatly not the case.
What does skin of blackness mean in the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, Nephi may very well believe that. Jacob doesn't. That doesn't mean it's prescriptive. That means it's descriptive.
Okay, so you're saying
To Kill a Mockingbird is racist.
You're saying Nephi was racist, but not God.
I'm saying possibly.
Okay,
that's cool. It's effectively diaries, right?
That's cool.
Prompt wasn't whether the doctrine can change. It was, is it okay for the doctrine to change? And I feel like that puts the church into a very precarious situation, especially going back to our last discussion when you said something that's still kind of in my head, the doctrine, the abuse of the doctrine of eternal family. Can the doctrine of eternal family, is it okay for the doctrine of eternal family to change within the LDS Church?
Is it okay? Again, I would just say, I guess define okay. Is there a scriptural precedent for it? And it could. Yes, absolutely. If a prophet were to come out and say, I've received a revelation from God, and X is going to change, and then he announces it in general conference, and I go home and pray about it, Tember goes home and pray about it, and we realize, okay, cool, this is a revelation from God, it's changing.
What about the families that lost so many sons and daughters to suicide because of that never-changing doctrine of specific eternal families? You cannot go to the celestial kingdom because you believe in this. We'll be able to visit you every now and again. We'll have a little family reunion, that kind of thing. But you just can't come in and visit us up there.
What he's talking about here is heaven and Mormonism have different tiers. And so what he's alluding to here is if you're a good person, but you're, let's say, gay, you can be in the first level, like the telestial heaven. And somebody from the celestial might be able to come down to that heaven and like visit like a family reunion and then go up. But if somebody's at the lower level, they can't go up to the higher level. So
up there. If that changes, the LDS Church is, I mean, they tried to do a little change-a-roo in 2015 where they were like, you know, children of, you know, same-sex households can't get baptized, and that was changed real quick.
Again,
and my
that's
parents,
a
policy. But we're talking about
Would you want me to answer the
lives.
question? Or
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, definitely.
So, first off, individually, just man to man, friend to friend. Hopefully we'll become friends. If somebody actually said that to you, what you just articulated right there, that is not Christ's doctrine applied through Christ-like love. There's 3 or 4 things that are wrong with what has happened to you guys if you guys are indeed regurgitating the story the way it happens, and I believe you. So on the individual level, I want to say, I see you, I validate what you've gone through, and my first initial reaction would be first to very quickly delineate between the church with a little c and a church with a big C. I will tell you the church with a big C and its codified doctrines is loving to all, gives an eternal, immeasurable value to every soul, and views you first as a child of God, not as a gay man, not as an ex-husband to a woman or a current husband to a man.
Again, so just to point out the type of logic or lack thereof that is being used here, he's saying that, no, the church and their codified doctrine, they're actually really good. Another way to view that is, from my perspective outside looking in, is the narrative and the surface stuff is really good. And we're supposed to treat everybody well, and we're taught all these really good things, but it's underneath a little bit where it actually falls apart.
Or a current husband to a man, it sees you as who you are. With that said, we all have really cringy, awkward friends who've said incorrect, sometimes maybe even cruel things to LGBTQ members, justified by false conceptions of God or misinterpretations of doctrine. And their bigotry they have tried to couch in religious writ or religious culture, and that is wrong simultaneously. If we're talking about, is it okay that doctrine changes? Yes, there's a completely, totally codified runway for how doctrine can change in our church, and it is okay for us as members because there's a mechanism for recognizing that as the revelation it is.
I think it's safe for the LDS Church to delineate between policy and doctrine, because if they change certain things that they've deemed doctrine, they're f***ed.
I think the problem is it keeps changing. And what happens is the prophet will say something, and then he says, this is God's word, and he does something like how youth couldn't get baptized if they were the children of queer parents, but then it swaps.
He did say when he said this is
yes,
doctrine, this
he did.
came from God.
And then it swapped back. So the problem that I have is that it's not that policies or things can change, it's the fact that we're constantly attributing things to God.
Yes.
And then when it changes again, we're like, oh, it was policy. Oh, it's a fallacy of man.
What kills me is, like, I was taught that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so on one hand, I feel like doctrine shouldn't change. And when we do see the changes happening, a lot of the time it's because of social media, it's because of headlines, it's because of the church trying to become more acceptable in society.
More transparent.
So with doctrine like polygamy was once practiced, now it's like an LDS thing, but it was once practiced by the mainstream church. Now it's been disavowed. We no longer do polygamy.
Well,
and yet,
technically it still is practiced.
In heaven, polygamy will be practiced. It's the way, it's the law of heaven, polygamy.
I'm so glad they're bringing this up because some members talk about this and some members don't, where like it's still taught in some circles that polygamy is going to be lived that way in heaven. I'm really curious to see if these other members actually agree with this.
Polygamy. And so I feel like it's been disavowed here on earth to like appease society, and yet in heaven.
So to summarize, like you're essentially saying that whenever there's social pressure that changes it,
yes.
it gets
I don't think
put
it's,
into policy.
I don't think it's
okay for
not to be a jerk, but this just sounds like, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but it sounds like you're just having a gripe. Like, yes, you can be frustrated that things have changed back and forth, but it is good for organizations to change for the better. I don't understand how anyone can say it's wrong for doctrine to change.
So I came out in the...
Okay, here's why. Change, good, yes. But when you say, this is the way that it is, and then you're pressuring people that you have to be this way, and then you change, it kind of just showed before that revealed like, oh, maybe it wasn't such a principled thing that had to change. And how can you trust the source or the prophets when they do change like that? You know, like, let's have a little bit of consistency.
I came out in the prompt because I'm grateful that the church has made these changes. The problem is that they don't own up to the mistakes they've made. They've never...
That is a good point. The problem is after they do change, it's not like that. It's just like, yeah, we changed, we made mistakes in the past. There's zero accountability. It's usually covered up as like, we've made no mistakes because we're infallible.
Never apologized to black people for excluding them for over a century. The problem is that when the church teaches something as doctrine to all its members, and it leads to carnage, whether it's LGBTQ deaths, destruction of families, systemic racism for over 150 years, the church never owns up and apologizes and says, hey, sorry, black people, we excluded you for 150 years. Sorry, parents of LGBT and siblings of LGBTQ youth. Sorry that your kids died. The church just says, oh, that was just policy. That they were all speaking as men, but then they turn around and say, but if the prophet's speaking now, you have to obey the prophet. You have to follow the prophet. So the church never atones. It never does what it asks the members to do.
I'm saying this with as much grace as I can muster. Our beloved prophet, Russell M. Nelson, you know, he is nearly 100. I'm not kidding.
99.
He's 99. And he is running a global organization. When he was going into college, the prophet of our church at his time was still a polygamist. Right? I mean, we're talking about old people that... He was born before the television, the former Queen of England, and Martin Luther King, and has outlived 2 of those 3 things, okay? So, again, give him grace. These people are doing the best.
But then what's the value of a prophet?
Like, do you believe he talks to God?
The value of the prophet is look at the people.
But he talks directly to God.
Sometimes,
face to face, maybe. I don't know.
But like God tells him the truths that he needs to know for the world today is what you believe.
We're talking about a beautiful cosmic entity that is Heavenly Father trying to channel information through a 99-year-old man in Salt Lake City.
But he does, yes?
Oh, yeah, to you as well.
Yeah, but it gets...
So am I a prophet?
I don't know, are you?
The Mormon Church has done good in the world. Agreeers, please step forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad everybody's stepping forward on this one.
We do a lot of humanitarian aid. We give wheelchairs out to people in like third world nations.
Here's the thing. The LDS Church, and I talk about this in the Anthony Padilla episode, the thing that makes things so fuzzy is, and this is the same in occults, in religions that go sideways, and even in a toxic relationship. It's not all bad. In fact, there's so much good. There's so much good in the LDS Church, certainly with the people. There's so much good with how, like, the family structures, the gatherings that people have, the growing of a community that are genuinely beautiful. And there are really good things that the LDS Church does all over the world. Like, I think that also needs to be acknowledged because it's just the truth.
I mean, there's a lot of good we do. I would agree that I would also say, you know, there's some things that other religions do better than us. Mm-hmm. The LDS Church does a great job helping out those who are needy.
I think the church does do a lot of great humanitarian work, and a lot of the time growing up, it was like, what can we do for our neighborhood? What can we do for our church community? What can we do for our fellow ward members? They just preach a lot of service qualities, which is great. On the other hand, I think that, I mean, I hate to say they could do more, and that's the negative, but like with all of the money that they inherit from tithing, the Mormon Church requires its members give 10% of their income before taxes to the Mormon Church, and then they utilize that.
10%, unless you're in the United Order, something that the early church tried to do, and fundamentalism still does, where you consecrate everything. That might be for another podcast episode down the road, but it's why Warren Jeffs had so much control in a way, because so many people are literally giving up their homes. And we were taught that if you gave up your home to the United Order and you went on a vacation and a trip, and you came back and another family was living in your house, that the church said it's their house now, you just still put a smile on your face and keep sweet about it, because it was never your house anyway, and you consecrated it. So 10% is like the bare minimum, but there's a whole other conversation around what is known as the United Order, which is giving up everything, not just 10%.
Utilize that money to do things, you know, around the world, like build malls. But I think that they could do more with the money they're doing. Yes, they do a lot of good, but I think they could do even more good if they utilize that money better.
When I personally had a surgery, and I had random members that I probably haven't even met from my church. They were leaving me gifts, they were leaving me notes, they were leaving me cards, just get well soon, nothing huge, but it's just the thought that counts. And I didn't even have family that would leave me things like that. They're just very thoughtful people, and they're always thinking of the next guy.
For especially the ex-Mormons, would you guys say it's more of a net positive or a net negative?
For me, it's going to be more of a net positive. And I know that's kind of surprising to probably a lot of people here. I left the Mormon Church just a few years ago because it didn't make me personally happy. I get to kind of sit here today in a little bit of a happy position, just knowing that, like, I don't really feel like I have a lot of religious trauma to speak of about my experience in the Mormon Church. I feel like when I went on my mission and I was called to Houston, Texas, I got to meet some amazing people, and the things that I taught in Preach My Gospel that spoke to me, that I still know to this day are true, are all of the things that I still keep in my life, that I hold dear, that I associate, the friends that I have, the family that I keep, just all the connections that I have are within those truths that I hold dear. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and just say it's a net positive for me, and I'm really thankful for that.
When I was in middle school, my parents got divorced, and I think my life could have gone in a lot of directions at that point. And I remember one of my Mormon church leaders has pulled me aside and he said, "John, you're a star." And so many good Mormon adult leaders rallied around me, supported me, and provided me with an amazing youth experience. And then I went on to serve a mission in Guatemala. I learned a foreign language. I spent 2 years in a developing country. And then just in my psychology training, people need identity, meaning, purpose, morality, a sense of spirituality, resolution about the afterlife, and friends and community. And one of the things that I regret is I've spent so much time trying to create secular community after being kicked out of the Mormon Church, and I have not been able to do anything like what the Mormon Church has been able to do. So until secular people are able to create communities that provide all those things to the secular people, I think religions like the Mormon Church are going to continue to have an important place.
Yeah, I could.
Solid point. Such a solid point. Yeah. Johnny Harris, YouTuber, talked about this on an episode he and I did together on Cultured a couple episodes back. You should check it out. But it's like, yeah, there is this sense of community when you belong to something in fundamentalism, fundamentalist Mormon, or just the Mormon Church, that is just hard to replicate. It is so good for the human soul to feel connected to a large body of people, and that is something that the LDS Church, like they do a fantastic job there in that sense of unity.
Yeah, I could say that a lot of the opportunities that I experienced, a lot of the mentors, a lot of the people that helped the village that raised me was within my church experience. And so my mission, I had positive experiences. I've met a lot of incredible people, built a lot of good connections, but I don't know that, I mean, I know, yeah, there's humanitarian stuff, but I don't know if you can weigh that to the youth suicide in the LGBTQ community. I don't know if we can weigh that. It's just hard to weigh those things out of, like, is the good better than the negative because of the spiritual trauma that it does cost, the emotional damage it does within families, within individuals. So I don't know that I could actually say which it does more of because the damage is so severe, but I know that there are positive experiences.
I can't have conversations like this with my family. It's not a way we speak with each other. We can't have this open dialogue of what we disagree about. And you know, maybe other families are different, but my family is very, very Mormon in that way, where very reactive and uncomfortable topics don't go well. And if I want to talk about the history or people of LGBTQ, it's not a conversation I can have. So having this conversation with all of you today almost was like a substitute for that.
So you need him to come to like family dinner.
Yes.
That's like,
that'd be great.
I'm not cheap.
Jubilee, good job again on having a mediator on this episode. I think it added so much to have that.
Well, so that concludes our episode of Mormons versus Ex-Mormons. If you guys want to embrace, shake hands, hug, whatever you guys need to do.
Group.
Bring
it in, bring it in.
And then I gotta go to the bathroom.
Have we met before? No. Good job. Okay, sorry. Step on your shoe. Oh, wait. It was so nice meeting you. We'll do a real hug.
It's messy. I think that's what I'm going to end this on. It's messy. It's a mix. Humans, obviously, they want to do good, and they want to be a part of something that is good, and therefore they want to defend something that has given them so much good. And there is a certain point where you kind of lose a sense of innocence, and you have to grow up a little bit when you recognize that the things that you thought were good, maybe that's a parent, maybe that's a church leader, it kind of hurts to recognize there's nuance to all this, and it's not all good. And the people we love are not all good. And I think that's what this episode that Jubilee just put out really shows, is that, yes, there are good parts and there's messy parts, that it all needs to be discussed. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that is a major critique I have with the Mormon Church and fundamentalist Mormonism, is the lack of dialogue. It's usually top down, this is the way it's done, and the further fundamentalist you go on the spectrum, the more it is that way. And again, that comes from just the early history of the LDS Church. And so the more there are power to people and individuals and open discussion, I think that's going to be the best thing for everyone. A lot of respect for all these guys that came on, whether they were ex or not, though, because that's uncomfortable to be challenged like that. I definitely feel that this was home court advantage for the ex-Mormons. Given the topics and stuff. So the fact that the Mormon crew kind of stuck with it and everything, I mean, yeah, props to them. Thank you so much for listening. This was my first reaction video here on Cultured, and I want to do more of this. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Are there any other questions you have around fundamentalist Mormonism? Anything we talked about here? Let me know. Is there any other things that I should react to? Let me know. Just any thoughts and comments in general, let me know, because this right here is what I want to keep doing more and more of. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, this show is for those that are curious. And so if you're still here, you've got that. So thanks for watching and listening wherever you're listening or watching, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.